welcome back to Movie Short. Today I'm going to show you a sci-fi movie. 2016 romantic movie Passengers. Spoiler first. Be careful and take care. The interstellar spacecraft Avalon could be seen traveling through space heading for the colony. A world called Homestead 2. The whole area is empty. The ship is in an autonomous system. 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers were in hibernation. Suddenly, the ship passed through the asteroid belt, which weakens the armor. Power is transferred to the main shield. But the ship was colliding with a giant asteroid. Suddenly an asteroid collides with a ship, causing various anomalies. The boat began to repair itself. But one hibernate pod is active. Suddenly an asteroid collides with a ship, causing various anomalies. The boat began to repair itself. But one hibernate pod is active. The waking passenger was Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer. His pod opens and the automation will wake him up to tell. It took 120 years to suspend animation, and the ship is just 4 months from Homestead 2. He said he would be able to spend that time enjoying the luxury of ship. Jim gets advice on identity circles, his cabin and main activities to join before they come to Earth. He was excited and nervous to meet the people on board. He prepares to leave the cabin and automatically walks into class for all learning groups. Jim looked a little worried when a hologram describes the situation on Earth, let's call it overpopulated. It told him to keep the question until the end of the lesson. But Jim still asks why. He was the only one there. He realized that the hologram could not answer him and went to the others. He reached the main corridor of the ship. No one was there either. But there is an automated information desk to help. Jim asks to talk to real people, and sent him to talk to Stuart, but when he found no one there, he asked to talk to the captain. When you reach the bridge, even if you can't go inside, you can see it. That none of the main crew was awake either. Finally Jim went to the observatory, where he found that the boat was actually many years away from Homestead 2. Realized that I didn't wake up in time, so I hurried back to the concert and sent a message. Returning to Earth, asked what he should do, because he didn't know how to go back into hibernation. The communication system informed him that the overpriced calls to the world would take some. Jim was devastated. He walked around and found a strip of the ship where he saw another person. While he was talking to the bartender, there was something strange about him. When he goes to buy a drink, Jim learns that he is a robot. Name Arthur. Jim wants to know more from him. But he couldn't explain it to the robot. How was it possible for him to get there prematurely? Jim woke up in his cabin the next day and went to the cafeteria, which he immediately realized that most of the menu items are reserved for gold passengers only. He drank a normal cup of coffee and tried to find a solution to the hibernation room. After he had obtained all the tools, he managed to get it to work and lay down under, but nothing happened. Next, he decides to use the tools he found to enter the crew's hibernation room. That doesn't work either. Minor anomalies occurred around the ship. Jim returned to the bar to continue drinking, but mostly talking to Arthur. The robot gave him some advice that made him break into the golden classroom and try to play on the boat. Jim long restaurant game all entertainment system. But over time instead, he was more sorrowful than being alone. One day he got drunk and wandered around the hibernation room when he stumbled upon it. Airlock with spacesuit designed for spacewalks. Jim got into the suit and went to the airlock, pushed the lever and pressed the release button. Airlock door. When leaving the ship, he was stunned by the scenery. He was the only human being with consciousness at the time. Jim released a magnet on his boots and floated into space with regret. He went back in, took off his suit, but went back into the airlock without wearing it. He pulled the lever ready to end everything, but changed his mind at the last minute, go back inside and slip on the bottle. Jim stood up and immediately attracted a woman in a pod named Aurora. He searched her files in the directory and listened to interviews with her passengers. Love you? Later, he was seen sitting next to the pod, still listening to her interview. Back to the bar, he reads her work and is talking to Arthur about her writing. He was obsessed with sarcastic situations. Better go to another planet. The life of waking up early to not find the perfect woman just for you. Out of reach. Jim kept thinking of her and began to think of waking her up too. He finished talking to the robot, but he did not understand this riddle. If he awakens her for his own benefit, he would imprison her there with him and continue to die. Ship. Jim decides against it first. But over time he can't let it go. Until one day he changed his mind. He goes to her pod and activates it. As she awoke and took the same steps as he did, he hid and returned. Go to his room. He soon went to the main courtyard, hoping to meet her, and she was as confused as he was a year ago. Jim told her that they were the only ones who woke her up and took her to the observatory. He then told her that he could not reach the crew or the ship's main command. Aurora was shocked and wanted to get back into her sheath. When they arrived, Jim explained that there were no special equipment on board to do this. Helped them get back into hibernation by effectively telling her that she was addicted. They returned to the courtyard and he told her that she should rest since she had just arrived. Exit hibernation. She felt pity for him to be on the boat alone for over a year. Jim returned to the bar. Regret what you do. He begged Arthur not to tell Aurora that he had woken her. The next day, Aurora woke up. She returned to the crowd and asked the automated information desk about hibernation. Sheath. Jim went to eat with her there. As they leave, the information desk has some malfunctions. In the cafeteria, Aurora realizes that Jim eats his usual breakfast, rather than that. Years and made him one of the gold menus. A tantalizing decision mocks Aurora's unprepared from Jim. Committed. The hospital search room completes the search for important documents. Go up to the hibernation room of the subsequent crew to open the door. Jim is very spicy. Experts order Aurora to mourn for life on Avalon. She wrote that jogging around the boat and swimming in the pool made it more mindful. Her situation. She went to the cafeteria to interview Jim. I think his story might be interesting. She asked why he migrated to the colony. Jim responded with the company's slogan first. But to explain further, I hope. In the new world, he could be anyone. He can create a life. Later ended up at the observatory. And finally, Aurora told me the reason to go there. Unlike the other passengers on the ship, she had a return ticket. Her idea was to go to Homestead too and live there for a year. And return to the world to become the first journalist to do that. Write the greatest story ever. Aurora slowly gave up trying to find a solution to Jim's current situation and body. To encourage her, he took her to dances, to the movies and to the basketball court. Finally, he takes her to the bar to meet Arthur. She relaxes a little. Until she remembered their situation. Jim is left alone with the robots. I feel bad for what he did to her. The next second he saw some repairs. And another Aurora walked into the observatory. To find the small Chrysler building that he built for her. After a while, we went on a date at a bar. They have a restaurant and share stories about their lives. She told him that her father died when she was a teenager. After dinner, Jim takes Aurora to the airlock and into the spacesuit. They go out for a walk in space together. Jim finally had someone to share a great experience with. Jim put magnets on his shoes and they floated together in space. They immediately came back and kissed each other. Go back into his hut and sleep together. Shortly after, they began to live like lovers. Aurora moves into his cabin and writes about her life on the ship. Run together, eat together, sleep together. Jim continued exploring the ship and found Hydroponics Bay. He brought Aurora flowers. One day the ship passed by the Red Giant and went to the observatory to look. It's Aurora's birthday. That night they were celebrating at a restaurant. On the boat and then the bar, Jim goes to the bathroom and prepares the ring that he made Aurora when she was in. Bart talks to Arthur. The robot tells Aurora that Jim accidentally woke her up. Without knowing that he was still alive. Keep a secret. Suddenly, Jim returned and she faced him in disbelief. She ran away furiously and panicked. Jim returns to the cabin to find the lost item. He ran to her in the cafeteria the next day. But as soon as he spoke, she ran away. Desperate Aurora. One night she went to Jim's cabin. Pick it, want to kill it. Talk to her on the computer because she is avoiding him. Jim tried to apologize and explain his actions with her. He told her that he fell in love with her. But Aurora didn't care. She couldn't forgive him for taking her life. One night, while Jim was in his cabin, there was another malfunction. The ship suffered a fatal error and the main command was closed. Later he walked into the elevator and it malfunctioned. Aurora walked into the main building and saw that Jim had planted a tree there. Then she went to the cafeteria where the dispenser also malfunctioned. The two of them suddenly heard the head of the social division ask who planted the tree. The two ran into the crowd and saw Gus Mancuso stood in front of Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and tell their boss about the situation. He didn't understand how the 3 pods could fail. Mancuso takes them to the bridge and finds something wrong with the ship. But have to check the information in T. When they leave the bridge, the robot almost landed on their heads and they both said Mancuso with anomalies occur throughout the vessel more often. He said that shouldn't happen. As he shows how to gather information, Mancuso checks the pod when Jim joins him there. He already knew what happened to Aurora's sheath. The deck leader finds what Jim has done is terrible. Later, he was at the bridge to examine the information he had gathered. When Aurora came to be with him, they talk about what happened to her pod, but he told her he couldn't do anything about it. Jim walked in with the broken 16th robot. Mancuso was sick, hibernated, and went to rest, but as he walked away, he coughed. Bleeding. That night, Aurora couldn't sleep, so she went swimming. Suddenly there was a loss of gravity throughout the ship and she drowned. From the pool moved with her. The gravity drive resets and she barely survived. The two ran towards each other to find Mancuso. The 3 of them slowly returned to the bridge. Find out what happened. With the boat, Mancuso found out that something happened 2 years ago brought out the main system. They had to find and fix what was causing them to fail. Because the whole ship is sagging. If not repaired, the entire ship will be aground. They go in search of trouble, but Mancuso faints, so Jim and Aurora take him to the hospital. He was dying and there was no cure. Shortly after, the trio met at the observatory and Mancuso handed him his gem. The bracelet ID tells you to repair the ship and immediately perish. Suddenly, the light turned a startling red and the ship began to tremble. Jim tells Aurora he needs her help, and they rush to do engineering work. But there is one more. Failure to drive gravity and many other things can be too painful. Engineering? The mill was obstructed and challenged. Aurora sucked the fire. Famous in various subjects, Jim was almost challenged by a bisexual man. You don't have to be brave to choose whether or not to delve into the vulnerabilities. Immediately after fixing that problem, Jim realized that there was more than one violation in the hull. The two followed the meteor's trajectory and were found to collide with the reactor. Computer control. Jim thinks he can find a replacement. They found a piece and replaced it, but the process of draining the reactor still failed. They do it themselves but it failed again. Jim knew he wanted to open the ventilation door from the outside of the ship, so they can cool the reactor. The two walked to the airlock, and while he was ready to leave he gave him Aurora Mancuso bracelet because he may not return. She helped him put on a dress, and as he walked into the airlock, she told him to come back. Because she can't be on the boat without him. Aurora returned to the reactor. At temperatures up to critical, lightning from the reactor hit her arm. When Jim approaches the vent from outside and saw the door, the temperature in the reactor chamber rose as he tried to bypass the ventilation door to open. He soon realized that he would have to open the door by hand so the reactor could drain, and told Aurora. She didn't like this plan, but he went ahead and told her to drain the reactor. She didn't want him to die and they quarreled, but he told her they had to help someone else and she drained the reactor. The process was successful, but the smoke from the reactor pushed Jim away and broke his leash. The pressure on his suit was reduced as well. He told Aurora what had happened, and she ran to find another outfit as quickly as possible and brought him in. He apologized to her again. She put on a suit and flew to him, but her leash was too short. She was pulled back, but suddenly he grabbed the leash and pulled him in. Aurora drags Jim into the infirmary, only to find that he was dead. She used Mancuso's bracelet to replace the medical protocol and save his life. The medical unit works automatically and revives Jim. Aurora forgives him. Later, Aurora repairs Arthur and they have Mancuso burial in the proper place. Jim took her to the infirmary and told her he had found a way to use the medical sheath. Hibernate. He told her to get into the pod and ride out for the rest of the journey there. But as revealed later, she refused and decided to stay with him. Wake up on the boat. Jim finally proposed to marry her, and they live on boats. 88 years later, Avalon arrives at Homestead too. The crew awoke to find that the ship was in an unexpected condition. Aurora left a message telling the story of her life and Jim on the ship, while others sleep. If you like it, please like, subscribe, and press the bell, so you don't miss the next movie from Movie Shot.